Hey everyone, Erick Stakelbeck here. Today on the Newscast, Hezbollah attempts yet another attack against Israeli positions in the north, and Israel responds as we take another step closer towards that coming Great Northern War. Get all the latest details coming up. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. Hezbollah is at it again. On Tuesday, August 25th, the world's most dangerous terrorist organization, really a terrorist army, attempted yet another attack against Israeli forces along that Israel-Lebanon border. Now, at least one Hezbollah gunman reportedly opened fire against Israeli positions along that border, and Israel, rightly so, responded. Number one, they lit up the night sky and that entire Israel-Lebanon border area. Again, this is southern Lebanon, which borders northern Israel, folks. They lit up the entire area. They fired flares to see what exactly was going on. And then Israel responded by bombing Hezbollah Watchtowers along that border. This was the first Israeli attack against Hezbollah positions inside Lebanon since the 2006 Israel-Hezbollah war, which shows you folks that things are escalating quickly. As we've been telling you for months here on the Watchman, this is all building towards a major conflict that we call the Great Northern War. So the Hezbollah leader, Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, is calling this, quote, a serious incident, and indeed it was. It's just the latest in a string of incidents over the past few weeks and months. We're going to get into it today, what it all means and what's coming next. Before we do, I just want to encourage you to subscribe to the Watchman News channel right here on YouTube and click that notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Folks, we are bringing you the kind of cutting-edge, timely information that you're just not hearing anywhere else, certainly not in the mainstream media. They are not digging in depth into this issue, but we are, because what happens in the Middle East does not stay in the Middle East, and everything that's unfolding there right now will profoundly affect all of us, no matter where we live. Okay, let's get into it. As I said, Tuesday, August 25th, another attempted Hezbollah attack against Israeli positions to the north of Israel. Now, this follows a string, as I mentioned, of attempted Hezbollah attacks. This really all started in late July when Israel carried out strikes in Syria, just outside of the Syrian capital of Damascus, and they took out at least one Hezbollah fighter who was operating there along with the Iranian regime and their various minions inside Syria. So a Hezbollah fighter was killed in that Israeli strike back in late July. And Hezbollah's policy historically has been, if you kill one of their fighters, if Israel kills one of their fighters, Hezbollah tries to respond in some way. Now, about a week after that Hezbollah fighter was taken out, I believe it was on July 27th, we had another attempted breach of the Israel-Lebanon border. Hezbollah fighters from the Lebanon side attempted to breach the border and enter northern Israel to do God knows what, carry out some kind of terror attack, kill, maim, or kidnap Israeli soldiers like they have done in the past. Thankfully, that attack was also unsuccessful. The Israel Defense Forces chased these Hezbollah fighters off with their tails between their legs. So the big question after that, again, it was exactly a month ago. Today's August 27th. This was July 27th. The big question after that, folks, was, okay, Hezbollah always retaliates tit for tat when one of their fighters is killed. Was this enough? Was this Hezbollah's response to their fighter being killed in Syria? Not clear right now if they thought that response was sufficient, because obviously we had this attempted attack just 2 days ago. So is this all lining up? Is this still attempted retribution to satisfy Hezbollah's bloodlust? It's unclear right now, but the good thing is it was unsuccessful yet again. Israel clearly on war footing, ladies and gentlemen. I've been telling you this here on the newscast for weeks now. I've been on that Israel-Lebanon border many times. I've actually been on live fire drills with the Israel Defense Forces near that border, and I have seen them up close at tank drills in the middle of the night. I have joined them in harsh conditions. I have seen them up close and seen the training they are doing. Folks, it is geared towards Hezbollah to the north. The Israel Defense Forces, their commanders, their top officials, they know this coming great northern war that we've been telling you about, not a question of if, but when. And when things happened like happened 2 days ago, it moves us closer towards a larger conflict. The Middle East right now in particular, that Israel-Lebanon border is an absolute powder keg, and the slightest little flare-up can spark a wider war. I do not exaggerate, ladies and gentlemen. So Israel is on war footing. They are prepared. They have a close eye on that border right now. And Hezbollah continues to probe. They're probing, they're looking for an opening. And the big question is, do they want to go all in? Meaning, do they really want to spark that war right now in the wake of the Beirut blasts a few weeks ago, which Hezbollah's fingerprints were on in some way? That ammonium nitrate, which went up in flames and destroyed a good chunk of Beirut, killed close to 200 people, wounded thousands more, left many people displaced and homeless in Beirut. There's a lot of anger against Hezbollah right now, righteous anger among the Lebanese people. So is this the time? And the Lebanese economy is cratering. And COVID-19 has had an impact there as well, a serious impact. So is this really the time that Hezbollah wants to spark a war with Israel and send the entire country into complete chaos? It all boils down to one thing, folks. Ultimately, this is not Hezbollah's decision. Remember, this would be the decision of the Iranian regime. If Iran says go, do it, Hezbollah must obey its master in Tehran. The Iranian regime is the head of the snake. Hezbollah answers to the Ayatollahs in Tehran. Do not forget it. They are Iran's most lethal proxy. They are indispensable in Iran's plan to destroy Israel and to dominate the region. So if the Iranian regime decides it's go time, we want to do this now, then Hezbollah will do it. I hope that day never comes. I hope it's no time soon. But folks, it seems like we are rapidly moving towards that confrontation where Israel is going to face off in what I believe will be a decisive battle against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and in Syria along that Golan border, also against the Iranian regime, its forces there in Syria and various Shia militias under Iran's direction. And I would not be surprised if Bashar al-Assad, another Iranian puppet, throws his hat in the ring as well. Again, powder keg situation. I wanted to give you a closer look at that Israel-Lebanon border. As I mentioned, I spend a lot of time there when I am in Israel because that's where the story is, right? We're telling you here on the newscast every week, 2 days a week, that this great northern war is coming. That's where the story is. So that's one of the places where I go when I am in Israel every few months. But since we are talking about these Hezbollah watchtowers that the Israel Defense Forces struck, and we're obviously talking about that Israel-Lebanon border area, I wanted to give you a quick up-close look at that region and at what these watchtowers that Israel struck on Tuesday, what they look like. That's number one. And number two, the UN. Our good friend Avi Melamed. This was about 2 years ago, I believe, this clip from the Watchman TV show that we're about to show you. Avi's a Middle East expert, excellent analyst all around, and he broke down for us the weakness of the UN as well. Remember, I didn't mention this at the top, but a crucial point to remember about this attempted Hezbollah attack on Tuesday. The UN, in the form of UNIFIL, it's called UNIFIL, the UN forces there, along that Israel-Lebanon border, along the so-called blue line, they are supposed to be keeping the peace. They are supposed to be keeping UN Resolution 1701, passed back in 2006 in the wake of that second Lebanon war when Israel faced off with Hezbollah the last time. Obviously, Hezbollah has gained major battlefield experience, built up their weapons arsenals in the past 14 years. Unfortunately, it's going to be a much tougher go this time around. But Resolution 1701 passed at the UN, basically to hold Hezbollah accountable. That resolution declares that no force other than the UN and the Lebanese armed forces in Lebanon should be armed. It calls for the disarming of the various militias in Lebanon. It calls for no armed force below the Litani River in Lebanon. That's three crucial pillars of Resolution 1701. And guess what? Hezbollah has broken all of them, ladies and gentlemen, right under the UN's noses. Once again, Hezbollah with an attempted attack on Tuesday against Israeli positions as within earshot of UN forces that are ostensibly there on the Israel-Lebanon border to prevent such an attack and to keep the peace. So check this clip out from our Watchman TV show, which you can catch if you live in the States. You can catch it every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on TBN, the world's largest Christian television network. Check out this quick piece from the show, Hezbollah Watchtowers, UN fecklessness on the Israel-Lebanon border with our friend Avi Melamed. Take a look.
The UN is here because Lebanese government failed to exercise their sovereignty. Reminding you, in 2006, the Israeli-Hezbollah war that lasted 33 days. Right. Following that war, United Nations Security Council 1701 ordered the deployment of Lebanese army and United Nations units all the way down to the border with Israel. That's the reason why you see today United Nations deployment here. That's the reason why you see today deployment of the Lebanese army as well. But the major factor on the ground as of now still remain the Hezbollah. The Watchtower is a great example for that.
That's stunning, Avi. We were discussing that Hezbollah has this watchtower right on Israel's border, looking out over Israel. Hezbollah, this militant terrorist army. Unbelievable. And this isn't the only one of these towers, Avi. As you and I were driving along here along the Lebanon border, we saw several of these Hezbollah towers dotting Israel's border in southern Lebanon, looking out over Israeli communities like Metula, where we've been today. And the most interesting part about it, in many ways, the UN, as you said, Avi, a UN base is right next to this Hezbollah tower. What is the UN doing here?
Excellent question. The UN is monitoring the situation on the ground, making sure, allegedly, that the instructions of 1701 Security Council resolution will be kept. One of the most important instructions is that the Hezbollah will be forbidden to have a formal open presence in the area stretching between the Israeli-Lebanese border up something like 40 kilometers. That is not the situation on the ground. The Hezbollah is everywhere. Up until recently, the Hezbollah was playing the game and was keeping a disguised presence. For example, the tower that we just mentioned.
An environmental tower.
An environmental, allegedly watching, sort of speaking. But recently, the Hezbollah have started openly at daylight, basically expressing an armed presence in the south part of Lebanon.
As you can see, the UN will have little to no effect in stopping this great northern war that is coming. Hezbollah has been able to build up a massive arsenal of rockets and missiles in southern Lebanon and position them in homes in southern Lebanon, literally under the UN's noses since 2006. So pardon me if I don't have much faith in the blue helmets of the UN along the Israel-Lebanon border. They will be ushered out of the way when hostilities commence. So Israel-Lebanon powder keg. One more thing I want to update you on. We mentioned on the Tuesday newscast and last Thursday. Again, check out our archives here on YouTube and be sure to subscribe. But we talked about Hamas down south to Israel's south, also flaring up out of Gaza. Hamas firing rockets, sending these airborne explosive devices, these incendiary balloons to scorch Israeli land and farmland and agriculture in southern Israel. Also a powder keg to the south. There's been discussions of a ceasefire. Hamas is rejecting them as of now, so keep an eye on Hamas to the south as well. I said last week, I'll say it again, though it's a serious threat to the south that I do not underestimate Hamas, it's really a distraction of sorts from the bigger picture and the larger threat and the larger conflict that is coming to the north. Needless to say, though, Hamas remains a thorn in the side of Israel. And another quick update from our Tuesday newscast, August 25th, we talked about Recep Erdogan, the radical Islamist Turkish president, trying to become the face of the Muslim Brotherhood today. Guess what? News broke just yesterday that Erdogan, During the Hamas members and leaders' visit to Istanbul over the weekend, they were awarded Turkish passports. Isn't that nice? A designated State Department, I'm in the United States, the United States State Department has designated Hamas as a global terrorist organization. Hamas has American blood on its hands, and yet Turkey is supposedly an American ally and a NATO ally. The two don't add up, folks, because Turkey under Erdogan is NINO, NATO in name only. We have to be realistic about the situation. Turkey under Erdogan is gone, and it is not coming back into the Western fold as long as he is in power. Dark days ahead, I fear, in that country. And that's not even mentioning their outright open hostility to Israel. Continue to keep an eye on Turkey under Erdogan. He is a dangerous man. Well, here's the good news. I know this is a lot of hard-hitting, tough information, but you're tuning into the newscast because you'd rather know than not know. I know that because if you're tuning into this newscast, you get it. The Bible talks about the men of Issachar, an elite group of 200 men who surrounded King David. They knew the signs, they knew the times, and they knew what Israel should do about it. I think you're in that group if you're watching us on a regular basis here on the Watchman Newscast. The men and women of Issachar for such a time as this. And the great thing is also, just to encourage you again before I go, the book of Psalms says time and time again that God sees Israel's enemies. He sees them gathering, plotting, planning, and he laughs. The God of Israel still sits on the throne, folks, and he sees what's going on. He laughs at Israel's enemies. His hand is on his people and on his land. Do not doubt it for a minute. Well, thanks for joining us today on the newscast. We will see you next week. Who knows, maybe an update over the weekend if something flares up, God forbid. But know that if anything happens, you will get the breaking, real information, the truth, right here on the Watchman Newscast. So until next time, God bless you, and remember, never hold your peace.